Yeah, yeah.
And we're live. This is my Chevy Chase, not noticing that we're live until a few seconds after we're live. It is Friday, January 9th, the year of our Lord 2026. It is 8 o'clock a.m. And Mike has a new Chiron, a river to his people. And I think we're going to make uh, a a new feature on the show uh, out of Mike having a new one every day. What is this a reference to?
So this is one of my favorite films of all time is Lawrence of Arabia, and T.E. Lawrence is one of my personal heroes as well. And when I was a supervisor at the Washington field office, it is always a tradition when a leader manager is departing that the subordinates make a sort of commemorative plaque or award, something as like a parting gift. And there's usually like a photo or some sort of visual thing, a bunch of challenge coins reflecting what you did in your time there, and then like an engraved plaque saying who you are, the days of service and stuff. And being a squad supervisor, I think if you ask anybody who is in bureau management, they'll say that was the most rewarding job they had and probably the most important in terms of the mentoring you do, the ability you're able to impact both people and operations. And just, I grew really close to my squad. Even now, they're some of the only people in the FBI who regularly still keep in touch with me, and we talk all the time. And knowing what my favorite film was, when they gave me my plaque the week I was leaving, they engraved under my name "A River to His People," which is how Adu Abu Tai, one of the various Saudi princes with whom Lawrence aligns himself, describes what he is to his tribe. And now, whenever my wife thanks me for doing something, I say, I am a river to my people.
Excellent.
She
Yeah.
sighs in exasperation.
I think that's right. That's the right approach on both of your parts. You
Yeah.
to be pretentious and she to sigh in exasperation.
Yeah.
Um, So we are streaming today not merely on on Twitch where you know we have, I don't know, something like 8 or 10 followers, and but on YouTube and on Substack. And I think this influencer life thing where you just stream to everywhere and see where you acquire followers is kind of fun. Uh, Folks, um, wherever you're joining, whether you're part of the Greek chorus, which is to say the real audience, or whether you're some interloper on some influencer based platform, or whether you're joining just because you've stumbled upon my Blue Sky thread and clicked on one of the things. You are very welcome. And this is Dog Shirt TV. The sun is not shining in Washington. The birds are chirping. It is going to be a great freaking day, and you are watching Dog Shirt TV, and it is a goddamn revolution in morning television. And let me tell you about some of the revolutionary features. One of the revolutionary features is that sometimes I wake up in the morning and I hear that there has been a mass attack in Kiev overnight. And so I text Anastasia Lapatina and I say, "Are you joining us on the show this morning to talk about the fact that the entire city of Kiev has been plunged into a lack of heat?" When I literally 6,000 apartment buildings this morning have no heat in Kiev, and it's going to be 15 degrees below 0 Celsius there. So And she, before she bothers to respond, I announce that she's going to be here. And so she may show up or she may not. And that's one of the revolutionary features of the show, that at some point in the coming hour, Nastia may pop up on screen and talk about what is going on in her hometown. Another one of the revolutionary features of the show is that every now and then, former special agent and assistant acting special agent in charge, Mike Feinberg, texts me in the morning. I have been talking about gross police shootings pretty much nonstop for the last 48 hours. Can we do something cultural today, like talk about film? And I say something like, sure, until Nastia shows up. And that is what passes for planning the show on this here revolutionary morning television program. Still, a third thing is that sometimes I get a little bit hoarse and I do nothing about that. So, folks, that is the story and the plans for today's show, all of which is to say that we are not allowed to have fun anymore, but we are allowed to talk about something cultural, uh, aka film or something like that, until Nastia shows up and describes the situation currently in Kiev. That is our agenda for the day. If you want to interrupt the agenda for the day, just pop up on screen. You know how to do that, and redirect. And we will go in some grisly other direction as per your request. Um, uh, um, Mike, what is your what are you thinking about? I suggested jokingly before we came on camera that maybe we should combine the police shooting subject with the cultural thing and talk about the history of police shootings in film, starting with Dirty Harry movies. Uh, I assumed you had something a little bit more high-minded to talk about.
No, I don't know. I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine from my time in Los Angeles who's a screenwriter, and he brought up an interesting point, which I'm sure others have brought up before. He was a very successful writer with a now syndicated TV show, which many people will know, but I'm not going to name. Just suffice to say, he was very successful at it. Um, his brother is an even more successful screenwriter who has written many of the Marvel films. And we were talking, and my buddy is now trying to break out into more esoteric projects. He's always been very influenced by people like Philip K. Dick, Rod Serling, sort of storytellers who don't really fit into a specific genre and encourage the viewers of looking at things in a different way. And he said one of like the real ironies of our current moment in terms of film and television is that there has never been as much available to the viewing public as there is at this very moment. But because of that, there is absolutely zero what he refers to as water cooler culture around any of it. Like, there's no single show that when you go to work the next morning, everybody is talking about. There is no, when Richard Kimball finally
Wait a
exonerates.
minute. What about Dog Shirt TV?
Well, I mean, among the select few, the cognoscenti, of course, but
I just wanted to make sure that we weren't. I mean, it's not a written
yeah,
show, but
yeah,
I do think water coolers everywhere are flooded. That's a bad metaphor because
yeah.
it's a water. Are There are people huddled around discussing this morning's Dog Shirt TV always.
Yeah, but his point was like, there's no lingua franca of culture anymore. Like, if you think back, and I mean, I think this was before both of us were of age, Ben, but based on what I know, when the colonel's helicopter blew up on MASH, or when Richard Kimball
When
exonerated
JR was
himself on
shot
The
when I
Fugitive,
was a
when JR
child.
was shot on Dallas. Like, there were events in cultural media, even maybe with the premiere of Twin Peaks, just how weird it was. And there's so much content now that there are very few cultural tokens which are actually shared across all of society. And we were just generally puzzled whether that's a good or bad thing and what it says about society in general.
Well, so I think it's a really interesting
Yeah.
thing, and I don't know how to evaluate it, to be honest, right? Um, that you can say it's the diffusion of American culture, but you could also say it's like the that there isn't really a national culture anymore, that there are many national cultures
Yeah.
such that we don't really share one. Now, query if we ever really did, in the sense that there were always people like me who, when that water cooler conversation was happening around the water cooler, hadn't watched that episode of
Yeah.
MASH because we'd never seen an episode of MASH because,
You're missing out.
well, I'm sure I am, and I'm not even objecting to the proposition. I'm just saying, like, there are whole waves of American popular culture that just leave out the vast number of people who aren't engaged with it. And, I feel that way when people talk about Taylor Swift or Beyonce or,
Yeah.
any of 100 other people. And also, to this day, there are these constant references to this thing called White Lotus that I'm
It's terrible, but that's
that
a
I'm
different story.
surrounded by. And I'm aware that there is a show about a Four Seasons-y resort called White Lotus. But that's kind of like all I know about it. And also all reality television, The Bachelorette, Survivor. I've never seen a single episode of any of these things. And so,
I'm with you on that. But what the thing that it makes me think about, and I know I am of a more conservative temperament than many, and I really worry this is like putting me in some sort of Venn diagram with people currently in the White House. But like, I do
no,
think.
they all watch all of them. I think
Oh yeah, I
they
think I think Stephen Miller is a huge fan of the works of David Lynch. But
in
just
fact, he's a character.
yeah, yeah. Like I think a some shared cultural touchstones are a necessary ingredient to a healthy polity. I don't know what the proper degree of that is, and I don't know what those touchstones should be, but like I do think part of being in a community is having certain. I think it has nothing to do with heritage or any of that bullshit. I think that like, you know, like agreeing on certain aesthetics like is one of what makes a community. And I think it's a much less pernicious form of community making than focusing on heritage or politics.
So
I'm thinking of this all out loud, so I don't know how well thought out this actually is.
I actually agree with that. I think that there's uh, that there is a lot to be said for the definition of the society and the community around the set of things that we do together.
Mm.
Um, the complication is that America has always been sufficiently diverse and
Yeah.
sufficiently large that that was never one set of things for one set of people. It's always been a more of a mosaic than that, and more of a, the answer in rural Big Island Hawaii was never
very
the
different
same
than
as
the
the
Upper East
answer
Side.
in urban Oakland was never the same as in, you know, Darby, Montana. Um, and so I guess I don't know how
I
much
don't
I
know if
think the decline of centralization in television, I don't doubt that it's a factor in the sort of disintegration of a national culture, but I don't know how much it is compared to, say, the um, uh, the fact that we all seem to hate each other now, which
I don't think it's totally unrelated, actually. I really don't. And this isn't something I've thought about more than, a couple minutes since this conversation I had last night. Let me bring up a different, more controversial, but related concern I have
okay,
that also has to do with, and this is something I've been talking about extensively with friends ever since we found out my wife was pregnant. And you've met many of these friends. You may have been present for some of the conversations at my son's bris, but you know, I don't know if people can see over my shoulder, but there's a series of compendiums from a now defunct magazine called Partisan Review that was sort of the intellectual standard setter for a certain group of writers and thinkers in Cold War New York, and
edited by the great Philip Roth.
including Philip Roth, Lionel Trilling was an early contributor. Saul Bellow wrote for them. I think Gertrude Himmelfarb, like a lot of people,
Who
very
became a bunch of whom became neoconservatives.
yes, which is how I originally found it, only to discover that like it was less about politics than it was like it was full of short stories and poetry. It was like
Right.
it was a gem of an experiment of a magazine. And it got me thinking, it was grouped into a community that was called the Little Magazines. And we don't need to get into that whole history, but like they had an outsized influence and they really became cultural gatekeepers um, for a larger segment of society than they themselves interacted with, if that makes
Correct.
sense. And I don't think we have that anymore. And it actually worries me because I've been thinking about like, what do I want to teach my son? Like, what are like, I was very fortunate in that I grew up in an area where physical media in an era where physical media was still a thing. And my film education, as esoteric and weird as it may seem now, was built largely by just wandering the shelves at Blockbuster Video in junior high.
Right.
Because even a major franchise like Blockbuster Video still exercised aesthetic judgment about what they carried, and their classic and foreign film collection
It was
was
pretty good.
outstanding.
It
Yeah,
was
like I
pretty good.
remember like that's how I first got exposed to Bergman was like, oh, here's a video with a picture of the Grim Reaper on the cover. This might be cool. It was not what I expected, but it opened my eye. Like, I mean, you know how much I love Bergman now. And I worry that we don't have the whole notion of cultural gatekeeping has become sort of passe, and
Well,
there's
it's
so much
not
more content. It's really hard to figure out like what do we expose ourselves to now?
right. So we've replaced cultural gatekeepers with algorithms.
Yeah, which
It's
is
not that we don't have them. It's that we've replaced it with, instead of saying, I trust Philip Roth to collect around himself the group of people who are going to I trust to inform my sensibilities. What we say is, I trust Netflix and Amazon to, because I liked this thing, or because it's not because I liked it, it's because I clicked that I liked
right.
it, or because I ordered this combination of things to uh, predict now the wrinkle here is that, uh,
But
and we
the
should
motivations of the algorithm and the motivations of Philip Roth are very different.
they're very different. And we should be candid that the algorithm is pretty good at it, um, as a predictor of what you're going to enjoy. And that's not to say that it's perfectly good at it or that it never screws up, but it outcompeted the Philip Robs of the
No,
world.
but they're doing very different. They have different motivations, but they're also doing very different things. I think a large part of what Philip Roth and others like him were trying to do was also expose people to things that they might not otherwise come across. And I think what the algorithms do is they almost funnel your interests. I've never, I like you're not going to expand genre based on the algorithms.
Well, so
Whereas I think a mag is, I'll take a different example, like Cahiers du Cinema, the sort of famous film criticism magazine from France. They actively encouraged people to go outside of their normal scope in a way. Like, you don't think of the French New Wave as being traditional, conventional studio system Hollywood films, and they're not. They're very much a reaction against that. But Kaiju Cinema still did an entire issue devoted to a single film of John Ford's to teach its audience about the tradition they were reacting against.
okay, but let's take for a minute a more modern example than, um, uh, some one that, unlike the Partisan Review, our audience may have some immediate, uh, tactile memory of engagement with. Partisan Review for is going to be only for people above a certain age.
Yes.
Let's talk about the New Republic when
Yes.
Leon Wieseltier was editing the back half of it, which was,
The
um,
back of the book.
the
Yes.
back of the book, the famed back of the book.
And
Now,
his new magazine, Liberties, actually very much does what I'm complaining not enough people do.
yes, and Leon and Celeste who edit that, but it also has a tiny circulation,
Yeah.
and so whereas the New Republic was distributing to something like 100,000
Yeah.
people for most of that period, it was, um, uh, doing a um, it was very much doing the things that you describe, and I would
Yes.
venture the guess that a very large percentage of the 100,000 subscribers to the New Republic during that period were subscribing to it because they wanted the weekly political coverage in the front half of the book, right? But they
Yeah.
were getting this remarkable journal that brought really important voices to the public. I mean, this was where Paul Berman published for years and years and years. This
Yeah.
is where, this was, Judge Posner's principal outlet for, in the more conservative space for public
Andrew
writing and
Sullivan.
essays.
Yeah.
You know, Cass Sunstein. Right? I mean, this was a remarkable group of people,
Yeah.
Martha Nussbaum.
Yeah.
And so, I do think that
My
there,
just as a side note, one of my favorite, two of my favorite book reviews of all time were takedowns Martha Nussbaum did for the New Republic of one of a very liberal book, one of a very conservative book, but both of them are like perfections of the form.
right. I mean, this was a remarkable product.
Yes,
And until,
it was sold.
it was destroyed,
Yeah,
as all publications are eventually destroyed. Um, and But it seems to me that during the period of this, the readership kept declining.
Yes.
Which is to say that everybody acknowledged that Leon's back of the book was a really important cultural thing,
Yeah.
and it had a hold on a remarkably small number of people doing an increasingly small amount of the cultural cultivation of the country.
And
And
we should also note, because it is important for the history of that magazine, like it was privately funded. It was
yes,
essentially a labor of love by a very wealthy individual.
correct,
Yeah,
and a very wealthy individual who was in it for something else. I
exactly.
mean, his, you know, Marty Peretz's money was uh was I mean, Marty and Leon were very close, and
Yeah.
Leon was a creature of the Marty Peretz era of the New Republic. But let's be honest, Marty Peretz was in it because he was militantly pro-Israel Democrat, and he
Trying to
wanted
be, yes.
a magazine that reflected
Yeah.
that. Now, that wasn't Leon's particular thing,
Mhm.
but he wasn't opposed to it either, and so
Right.
there was a very useful marriage between them that was effective and and worked very well, but it worked until it didn't, and then the whole thing
Yeah, I mean, literally in the course of 24 hours, everybody of note resigned. And in the next 24 hours, many subscribers, including a relatively young Mike Feinberg, who had just established himself in Los Angeles, canceled their subscriptions.
well, yeah, so the you know when that happened, one of that was the first example of the lawfare refugee program, was
I did
that
not know that.
the
All
the
right.
young the young Yishai Schwartz, who had been a lawfare contributor, and as a before going to law school, and I had sent him to work for the New Republic right before that happened, and then he was uh, you know called me in a panic and said, "Can I come back?" And I said, "Yes." And that is how Yishai ended up back at Lawfare before eventually going to law school.
Yeah.
Um, Look, I mean, I believe in these cultural gateway
Yeah.
institutions, but I also don't want to be sentimental about them. They don't have a market, and and I think none of them has a market. And so, like, let's talk about lawfare in this context.
Yeah.
We do book reviews.
Yes.
I don't. I love our book reviews.
Yeah.
I don't know that a single person is a financial or material supporter of lawfare because of our book
Because the book
reviews.
reviews, yes.
Um, it is something we can do that gets usefully subsidized by the other things that we do that bring in revenue, which, let's be honest about what those are. People subscribe to lawfare because of court coverage.
Mhm.
People support lawfare in companies and foundations support lawfare because of cybersecurity issues, because of AI discussions.
Yeah.
Nobody is saying to us, "Come, we'll give you a grant for, I don't know, 100K or
Yeah.
250K or $500,000 so that you can do cultural gateway work."
Right.
And I don't know of anybody else who is being funded to
For
do
that.
that either. And I don't think that's because it's not a useful function. I think it's just because there's not a market for it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I know you're right, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to mourn it.
Look, I'm all for mourning it,
Yeah.
and I'm all for thinking creatively about what the strategies are to recreate portions of it. But I think it has to be done in ways that are not sentimental, or they are bound to fail.
And look, there are some people still trying to do it. I forget who. Somebody in the comments mentioned N+1, which actually a number of my friends were involved in the founding of. And they do it. I'm not a huge fan of their politics, and I think their politics tend to affect their aesthetic judgments, but like they're still doing it, and so I should give credit where credit's due. Um, I don't know. I feel, and this is a larger conversation. I feel like the very notion of cultural gatekeeping by a lot of the magazines that used to do it, like the New Yorker or the New York Review of Books, it's become sort of declasse, except in as much as it supports a view that is more political than aesthetic. I don't know how well I'm articulating that, but like,
I will return to that point after Carol
yeah,
makes her point. Carol, is your mic working today?
I think so.
It is.
It is.
Wow, we can hear you again.
Fantastic.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Somehow the laptop was taking my phone microphone and I couldn't figure out how to make it stop. So I did the quick and dirty fix. I turned off my phone.
Fabulous. What is
So
on your mind this morning?
it is totally and completely unrelated to anything substantive that anybody has been talking about for the last couple of days, but it was mentioned on screen.
bring it on.
Excellent.
The recording of the B minor mass that Richard Wattenberger recommended by Pichon.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Wow. I am
It
so
is
excited
really,
about it.
really wonderful.
So you are, but Carol, you have just contradicted the point that I was about to make, and I don't know if I can forgive that.
What
No,
was the point you were going to make?
the point that I was about to make in response to Mike's point is, I have been on this writing crusade about Brahms, and along the way
You've been on
have
your Brahms crusade for a very long time.
I'm sorry, Mike.
I remember going to Solid Core with you 5 years ago, and you complaining that they did not have good music, which I
Correct.
agree with you completely. And you said they need to have one for adults, and then you named a Brahms piece that was like the perfect length and tempo.
No. That was a Bartok piece.
Yes,
I
okay.
wanted them to do the concerto for orchestra as
Okay.
an exercise, and it's exactly 50 minutes long, depending on how you conduct it. So
Okay.
look, no, but here I was about to say I have been, methodically making my way through Brahms, writing about it. And there's only like 3 people who seem to care about this: Richard, Jeff has been, but there aren't a lot of people who've been responding to the Brahms thing, and I don't care. I do it anyway because I enjoy it. But it's not like when you do purely aesthetic cultural writing
Mhm.
that like you get you get like a feedback loop that's positive with that. And then I was about to make that point, and then Carol comes on and announces that she followed Richard's as purely aesthetic recommendation
Right.
about the B minor mass, which, by the way, as I mentioned the other day, may be simply the greatest piece of music ever written.
My harpsichord teacher would say it was the St. Matthew Passion, but we're close.
Right. I mean, like one can you're arguing among the titans there. But
Could I give a hat tip to somebody who has inordinately influenced my classical music education in a way that was probably wholly unintended.
Yes,
And whom I've never
but you have
met.
to wait until I finish.
Sorry, all right.
Until I finish ribbing Carol about this.
Fair
So
enough.
I was about to make this point, and I had this great example, the Brahms series, and here comes Carol on the screen, pointing out that one of the responses to the Brahms series and to the efforts that I've been making to get people to make music, great music recommendations, that she'd actually gone and listened to it. And oh my God, Richard Blottenbarger is right. And so, Carol, what about my needs here? I'm very excited to listen to that piece.
To be honest, I'm not a Brahms person, so I haven't been following that closely. Maybe that
See?
helps your argument.
Well, I am both a Bach person and a Brahms person, and when I finish the Brahms project, the next project, which I'm very excited about, is going to be to go through all 150 plus Bach cantatas, which I have never listened to as an organized set. I've listened to many of them, and I'm in love with many of them. But I do think they're all perfect lengths for like one day of you can do like a Bach cantata a day, and he wrote one a week for 3 years, which, by the way, is a feat unparalleled in the history of music. And so that's my next project. So we're going to go back to the Baroque era for those of you who are Baroque music aficionados. But we
Baroque
still
and earlier, but
we still got a 100 plus Brahms opuses to go through. And by the way, I posted this morning. If you have never listened to the Brahms Opus 25 piano quartet, it is a mesmerizingly great piece of music. And
what opus number was that?
25.
Okay.
I linked to several recordings of it in today's Dog Shirt Daily, and also listen to the Arnold Schoenberg 1937 orchestration of it, which was written for Otto von Klemperer and premiered by the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And it is not what you would expect from Arnold Schoenberg. It is wholly melodic and shows very little. Everything you think you know about Arnold Schoenberg is not reflected in this piece. But the underlying quartet is, I remember the first time I listened to it, which was when I was 19 or 20, and I tell the story of that in the little post. But it is, if you want a great introduction to Brahms chamber music that contains, some of the later Brahms chamber music is, has accessibility issues. Some of it can be very dense, and takes a little bit of work. This takes no work. You put it on, and it just overwhelms you, and it never gets old. And so if there's one, I don't know, I wouldn't say if there's only one piece of Brahms that you listen to from this series, make it this one. But if there's 5, if there's 6, if there's 10, make this one of them. It's an overwhelmingly great piece.
I will check it out. You've convinced me, and that is unusual for pieces written after, say, 1800.
Remember remember,
There are
Carol.
other people I like very much after 1800.
No,
Don't.
no, but just remember that Brahms was a throwback. He was writing in the more classical idiom. He was snotted upon by Richard Wagner and
Who
Oh,
wasn't?
now that's a plus right there.
well, but Brahms had a great comeback. Brahms once said of Bizet's Carmen, which he had, I believe he saw like 20 times in Vienna, that it was the greatest opera written since the Franco-Prussian War. And that is a real dig at Wagner. Mike, you had a point that you were going to make.
I've got a couple points actually based on everything you just said. We can talk about Schoenberg, or we could talk about unappreciated proselytizers for classical music for beginners. Which do you want to start with?
I think the possibility of alienating people by talking about Arnold Schoenberg is high, and so let's
Fair enough.
at
All right.
least start with the other.
Um,
But by the way, for those of you who have a prejudice against Schoenberg, if you've never listened to Verklärte Nacht, it's a very beautiful piece, and will convince you that he was not incapable of writing music.
I don't have a prejudice against Schoenberg. I have a postjudice.
I love
Fair
Schoenberg.
enough.
We'll get to that in a second. One of my real gateway drugs to classical music, as odd as it sounds, was actually Martin Scorsese. I think it
Who
is
has excellent taste in music, by the way.
unbelievable. I think, and there's two scenes in particular. One of them, which ties to one of the pieces we've been talking about. The credits to Raging Bull are simply Jake LaMotta shadowboxing in a hazy corner of a ring to the overture from Cavalleria Rusticana. And I saw it, I was probably 12. And it might be the first piece of classical music I ever heard, and really encouraged me to explore more in that area. And the other piece of his that really comes to mind, or not piece, but scene, is in Casino, which is admittedly one of his lesser films. There is a scene of somebody getting blown up in slow motion set to the St. Matthew Passion, which is how I discovered that piece.
Which is, by the way, that is stolen from I mean, stolen in a homage kind of way, not in a theft kind of way, from The Godfather, where the scenes of the killings at the end against
during the baptism
are also set to Bach organ music. I forget which piece it is.
Yes, and I was very disappointed. My son is being raised in an interfaith setting, and at his own baptism, I was really disappointed that because I am not of the faith, I was not asked, do I reject Satan and all of his works? Like Michael Corleone was, because I'm like, I've got like a fair number of people I dislike now. Can I do some sort of orchestrated massacre of them while the baptism is going on? And my wife, who took the baptism quite seriously, frowned upon that.
Well, I once had to participate in a baptism as part of as a godfather, actually, and I was asked to renounce Satan and all of his works, and it was in the history of my engagement with Christianity, which is admittedly limited, one of the high points.
More expansive these days.
No, I want to focus for a moment on something that is being talked about in the chat, which dovetails with Mike's point about Scorsese and which is the role of Looney Tunes.
I was going to mention that.
I am one of the
I was
reasons
just
I am
waiting for the time.
one of the reasons I am ecstatic about being in the DC area again is that I can take my son to Opera in the Outfield, where they always show what's Opera Doc on the big screen as
Yeah.
a prelude.
So Looney Tunes, speaking of shared culture, Looney Tunes did more to expose more people to more serious music than any other cultural institution, as far as I know, in the world. Um, I mean, Disney did some as well, but Looney Tunes was an extended campaign, and there are a lot of people who know a lot of music or some music and don't know where they know it from. They just associate it with these cartoons.
And the
And
William Tell Overture, for instance, they only think of the Lone Ranger, but it's also always the theme for the mornings
Yeah.
in the Looney Tunes cartoons, another section of it.
right. And the, you know, and I um I have there are, from so there are very, very few great movies about music. There are some, and it's very rare, actually, that filmmakers know enough about music to do this. But there's a wonderful, wonderful movie from the early 90s about violin repairmen and their clients, called Encore un hiver, which stars the very young Emmanuel Béart and Danielle Auteuil. That is an entirely Ravel score, that I learned music from, and it has. I was in love with Ravel before then, but it had meaningfully increased my love of Ravel. These movies are extremely rare. Um, the much more important way that people learn music through movies is incidentally.
Mhm.
And the moment has come where we have to drop all of this
Bye-bye.
cultural nonsense that we're talking about, because Nastya has arrived. And as I promised you, we were going to talk cultural stuff like film, as Mike put it, until Nastya showed up. We need an update on the situation in Kiev. First of all, Nastya, is everybody okay? And is your apartment adequately warm?
Everyone is okay apart from the 4 people who were killed last night in Kyiv. But apart from those people, everyone is fine. My apartment is okay. There is heating. There was electricity when I was there a few hours ago. But the weather is ridiculous. It's like minus 10 Celsius, which is really cold. And then it's super windy, which, you know how the weather app shows you like the actual temperature and then what it feels like. So it's like feels like minus 19. It's like very, very cold. And today is the first day of like a week long kind of cyclone situation where like the temperature is really plunged, and it's going to be as cold as like minus 20 in a few days, which is obviously why the Russians attack now.
And
um
what did they attack? It was the heating infrastructure. So for those who don't know this, a lot Kiev, a lot like a lot of post-Soviet cities, has a kind of centralized heating that,
hmm
these giant heating
boiler
plants heat
houses, yeah.
many, many buildings.
Yeah,
And so the
yeah.
Russians, according to what I saw, knocked out heat to 6,000 apartment buildings. So
Yes.
walk us through, what did they hit?
We don't actually know because it's probably classified. So we know they hit energy infrastructure obviously, but we don't know what exact thing was hit. And yeah, the Kyiv mayor Klitschko put out a statement saying that it was one of the worst attacks on like I think heating and energy sets in Kiev in a while. And moreover, he urged Kiev residents to leave Kiev if they could, which is really ridiculous.
And yeah,
Well,
that
really,
is new, right? I have not
I've
heard
never
of.
I've never heard that. Yeah, I've never heard that. Yeah, so but basically with the idea that, if you have, because a lot of people have like dachas in the suburbs and stuff, it's like a normal thing for families to have a house. And he's basically saying if you can go somewhere in the suburbs where you just use wood for heating, and like you have like autonomous like systems and stuff, it would be better to just like relieve some of the pressure from the electric grid, as far as I understand. Um, but yeah, people were kind of pissed at that because the reason why we're in this situation is A, Russia, but also B, Klitschko is one of the most corrupt people in the country, and he's running Kiev in the mayor's office like a criminal gang. I'm not even making this up. Like his deputies and people in his office were investigated on charges of like a criminal conspiracy because they literally run the city like a gang. Meaning like he had the budget to build all sorts of redundancies and make sure that all of the things were in place so people don't lose heating, but he probably didn't do it.
He's the former boxer, right?
Right. And it's one of those many things where foreigners just have no idea what they're talking about when they're talking about it. Like I would have like all of these guys who are like boxing fans being like, "Oh my God, Klitschko is so cool," and I'm like, "Yeah, he's also a criminal, but
Yeah,
whatever."
he's for what it's worth, he's a great boxer. But
No, I mean, I grew up
there is,
watching him boxing. I know.
yeah,
When I was
remarkably
young.
though, there is little bit of a common area in the Venn diagram between intellectual and
And
moral
Mayor,
maturity and
yeah,
being a good boxer. So
definitely, yeah, yeah.
I would
Uh,
not hire Mike Tyson to run a city.
no, no, you don't do that. He's also like people kind of make fun of Klitschko because he has really bad Ukrainian. He's a Russian speaker, and he's very not articulate. And people make fun of him as it's like he's a boxer, so he's been like hit on the head many times, and he like can't put two words together. There's like a whole thing, like he literally cannot like talk. Like there are memes about it everywhere. Anyway, this is beside the point. The point is that Russians are evil. That's the
So
point.
Can I contribute something from my former life to back up Nastya's point?
yeah,
Russia is one of the only countries whose military doctrine, taken in a vacuum, is fundamentally evil before they even apply it to
Preaching to the choir.
actual campaigns. They're
But
one
what
of
do you mean by that?
so two things come to mind. They are one of the only countries whose military doctrine calls for the first use of tactical nuclear weapons as a tool to bring people to a negotiating table. No civilized country has ever said, and I'm assuming most people know the difference between a tactical and a strategic nuclear weapon. Tactical nuclear weapons are much smaller in scale. They're designed towards influencing a battlefield as opposed to destroying an entire city or country. But they still have lots of really bad after effects with things like radiation. And, Russia is one of the only countries that has explicitly said we are willing to use them in order to bring other intransient parties to a negotiating table. Like, that's fucking evil. The second
and just to I can't remember if it's the Washington Post or the New York Times this morning that reported that the Russians used a intermediate range missile that was nuclear capable
New York
last
Times
night.
did that.
yeah,
That probably scared a lot of people because they just said Russia used a nuclear capable missile against Ukraine. I feel like some people don't know what that means and they would freak out.
Right, but it is, these are weapons that we had
Try to
a
not
ban
use.
with the Russians on,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
it's
Mike, you were saying?
No, the other thing they do, which is just straight up evil, is they are one of the few nations that is willing to say they will make attacks on civilian critical infrastructure a part of their regular military campaigns. Like,
They have that in writing. Interesting.
I don't know. I think it is part of their official doctrine.
I mean, they certainly do it.
They do
Let
it.
us
They
see
definitely, they
last
definitely
night.
do it.
But like,
Yeah.
look, I am somebody, probably of the entire lawfare masthead, Ben. I am probably, with the exception of maybe Jack Goldsmith, the most skeptical of the application of international law, even in the treaty system, even in the treaty context, as a means of, putting a leash on more aggressive states. But like, there are some things that should be beyond the civilized pale, and purposefully attacking civilian infrastructure is absolutely one of them. Um,
Hmm.
like this is fucking barbarism, and the people in America who admire this sort of thuggery as some sort of throwback to muscular realpolitik are also pretty fucking evil. And I don't know that I have a larger point than that. It's
Yeah,
just
I'm not.
But
Where are you going with this argument, Mike?
like,
the argument is Russia is evil. I'm happy he brought that up.
yeah,
Nazi is here for it.
yeah.
Um,
It's not just that Russia is evil. It is that the people who support Russia implicitly or explicitly in the United States as some sort of manly nation have no
Hmm.
fucking idea what they are talking about, no experience in what is acceptable in the realm of military and intelligence affairs, and are admiring what any civilized human being would have no problem calling barbarism.
All right, I want to leave that there for a moment and go back to the on the ground
Sorry.
situation.
Yeah.
Um, so Nastya, 6,000 apartment buildings. These are big buildings. Do we know anything
Yeah.
about the number of people affected just by the lack of heat?
I have not seen the numbers. I've only seen as of like an hour or so ago. I've seen the statement by Klitschko about the 6,000 apartments, but I haven't seen the amount of people now. And I mean, it's also worth saying that we don't know. Like, usually the repairs happen pretty quickly. Usually, I don't know what the scale of the destruction is right now, but in the past, it's a matter of a day or two
I
before
see.
things are back to normal.
And
So
what do people do in the meantime? So some people go to their dachas. Some people go to. Some people will, I assume, drain the electricity grid with portable space heaters, right?
yeah, that's sort of the problem. Yeah, because then it just makes everything worse. People go to these resilience points. We talked about them in the past, like little locations that paid by donors and used to be paid by American money when it was still around, where you would just like a space, like in some sort of public space, like in a school or something, that would have a
Kind of
bunch
the
of
same as
heating.
what we do in hurricane relief situations,
Maybe
like
maybe
centers where people can go and
like charge their phones and yeah, and have
right.
coffee and yeah, like the fact that you guys have hurricanes is beyond me. I don't think Ukraine has ever had a hurricane or
We have hurricanes
and
every year
I
in
have
fairly large numbers,
I have
but we
no idea
don't
what
have
that
Russian
means.
missiles.
No, you don't. Everyone has their own thing.
We all have our own problems.
We also don't have floods. Like we just don't experience all of that.
You guys get
Yeah.
some man-made floods sometimes, like when the Russians bomb a dam.
Yeah, really not great. Also barbaric, by the way, adding to
Um,
Mike's point.
so what? So are people? I take it Kievans are responding to this with their usual mix of shrugging
Fuck
shoulders
you.
and
Yeah.
cursing Russians.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone is like, so this Areshnik thing, they hit Lviv with an Areshnik, which is
Oreshnik
like this,
is the missile.
the nuclear capable missile, which it's just like like it's ridiculous because if it's used conventionally, i.e., without nuclear weapons in it, it's just a missile. It doesn't really do much at all. But every time they launch it, they present it like it's a media thing for them. Like this whole missile, they present it as this like greatest missile in the world, but it's really nothing. Like it does some damage, but not more than a bunch of ballistic missiles that they launch at us all the time do. And so people were making a lot of fun online about that this morning of like, they said that the Areshnik was a response to the Ukraine attack on Putin's residence, which was bullshit whenever it's like his residence. So they said that it's amazing. It's so Russian. They like made that shit up, then attacked us with the scary missile in response to the thing that they made up.
Right.
And now they're like chest thumping and everything. Meanwhile, people are like carrying on like nothing happened, you know? So
But it
brace
is,
yourself for the trip, Ben.
but it is, yeah. So this all happened in response to my buying a ticket
Yes.
I will be
Kiev.
in Kiev in
To Poland.
2 weeks, and that is what prompted this spate of attacks. And
Ben, are we gonna do Dog Shirt TV when you're here?
Absolutely. Dog Shirt TV
Amazing.
will continue, and we will do it from
Great.
different locations.
Yes.
Folks, we're going to wrap up. Reminder, we have a Mara Book Club event this Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. We will be joined by the estimable Stephen Marsh to discuss his book, The Next Civil War. We're going to be back as well on Monday morning at the usual time. I honestly don't know who the co-hosts are going to be, except I suspect Mike Feinberg and Holly Berkeley Fletcher will be there. I don't know who the guest is going to be, or if there's going to be a guest. I don't know what fresh hell Vladimir Putin is going to unleash on Kiev between now and then. But you're going to be there, and I'm going to be there, and it's going to be a blast. And to the 57 people who are joining us and the 120 people who are joining us on Substack, come into the light. Join the Greek chorus in Riverside, where we always live stream. It's not just in every few days I do a live stream to other platforms. You can join every day, 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can do what Carol did this morning, pop up on screen with whatever technical problems you may be having with your microphone, and give your thoughts. You can share your music preferences, and folks, it's going to be okay.